So, dear friends, I want to spend a little bit of time talking about each of two things and then open to some questions. And I can't guarantee responses. I could definitely guarantee a response. Um, and in a way, what I'm going to say about these two things, there's this irony where, I don't know, they could kind of be uh, contradictory in a way. Um, but that's how it goes. Different perspectives change the understanding of things. So the Buddha clearly encouraged us to not spend a lot of time discussing our suffering with ourselves. And I know that whether that could be helpful or not is debatable, especially by professionals who just spend a lot of time discussing suffering. Um, but but what I mean by that is turning the story of your suffering over and over again in your mind, right? Trying to figure it out again and again and again. He encouraged us not to do a lot of mental rehearsal of the stories of suffering, because that rehearsal, just like if you were learning lines for a play, will strengthen that story in your consciousness, in your being. When I was in college, I studied a bunch about transformational therapies, and I did a lot of those in the process. And one of the things that I did experiment with in my own therapy experiences at that time was working with anger and the pillow beating technique. And a couple of years later in Plum Village, heard my teacher specifically mention that practice of anger management by beating a pillow, right, as not a very helpful thing to do. And it made me reflect on what I had experienced. And I found what my teacher said to actually ring true for me. If you understand your consciousness, that is, the experience you are having within yourself of yourself, right, as a kind of a garden that you can cultivate. You can cultivate this kind of plant or that kind of plant, this sort of experience or that sort of experience. You could cultivate the capacity in yourself to be very patient and respectful and kind. You could cultivate in yourself the capacity to be an attack dog and really be very reactive and critical and angry. If you see that your consciousness is organic like that it's in a process of change all the time, and that change depends on how you take care of that garden of your heart, right? Then anger management by pillow beating doesn't make a lot of sense. Because what you do is you're rehearsing your anger. You're actually making the pattern stronger. And when I reflected back on my experiences of that, I saw that to be quite true. And it hardened my views about what was wrong and with the people that I was angry with. And it solidified for me a sense of righteousness in my anger, which also stuck me in that box of my anger. right? Kept me there. And so it grew the capacity in me to be angry and reactive, and to have to carry around the burden of my injustices more, right? To really hold on to them, to grab onto them. It made it stronger. So the encouragement from the Buddha is not to spend a lot of time rehearsing the seeds of suffering in us. But what he does encourage us to do is to acknowledge them. We're not going to run away from them. We're going to acknowledge them and hold them, embrace them, take care of them, understand them, and perhaps do that gardening in such a way that it transforms the experience of our suffering. So you can liken rehearsal of your suffering to the experience of picking a scab. So if you get a cut and there's a small wound there and it forms a little blood clot which becomes a scab, and then you pick it and you pick it and you pick it, each time it starts to heal, you pick it off again. What happens? You get a scar. It stays with you, right? It's like that. When we rehearse something in our consciousness, in our experience, we go over it again and again and again. We create the conditions for its longevity. The wound festers, we get the scar. So the encouragement the Buddha offered was that what thinking we do about our suffering needs to be care-filled, intentional, in accord with the deepest understanding that we can have, our own insight and understanding, and that of our ancestors whom we trust. That's the kind of thinking we want to do about our stories of suffering. And he also encouraged us to learn to relate to the experience of suffering through our feeling and sensation. So at the same time as we calm down the activity of the story around our suffering, calm our mind and the agitation there, we develop a capacity to be with that experience of suffering simply as it is, without having to tell the story, just to be there with the feelings. That's the embrace practice. So when we do this, and we do it well, we find that our holding on to the suffering, making it so important, lessens a lot. The urgency in it dies down very quickly. So I don't know if you can call up your tender heart right now, or if you want to even, but I'm sure it's there. It must be. We do this feeling-based work, breathing with our feeling. We do it with that intention to soften, open, and release our tight, grasping attachment and identifying with it, right? So coming home to the body and feeling the resonance in our body of where there is tension, there are surely emotional senses, feelings in that tension. Maybe you feel tension in your throat, your chest, your back, your belly, your solar plexus. When you're afraid, when you are hurt, when you are angry, right? It's resonating somewhere in the space of the body. That's one way we can come home to take care of that suffering. Where in the body is it? And literally go there and give it a hug. Right? Release the tension, the grasping, the this is me, this defines me, this is important to me, right? Let go of that energy a little bit. the suffering's not just going to go away. So you're not going to, it's not like doing not suppressing or oppressing or, trying to sweep away something which might be important in your life, right? It's simply letting go of some of the tightness around it. Yeah. And we can do that in that feeling space. We feel in our bodies, and we feel with our open heart and this clear intentions of the thinking, right? There, I want to be present with myself, as if I were holding a little child. I will hold the feeling, the painful feeling I have. This is a kind of meditation. It's breathing in, I am aware of the pain in me, of the suffering in me, and breathing out, I embrace and I comfort myself. You see, when the story is active in your mind, it's going to drag you around and you're going to feel the results of that story. But when you turn the story of suffering off in your mind and you have a new thought, which is, I'm coming home to take care of myself, this is the new story. And you'll begin to feel the results of those thoughts. And if you really practice wholeheartedly, the result of those thoughts is going to feel good, right? The pain is still there, the suffering is still there. The situation in the world which helped to bring this about may still be there, but how we experience it begins to shift. Now we are a part of the story, not dragged around behind it. We are one of the co-creators now, the co-manifestors. Our mindfulness, our compassionate holding, our conscious breathing become part of the story now. Tai describes it like this: the seed of suffering which is in your heart, this is my left hand right here, the seed of suffering is in my heart, held by the seed of mindfulness, the practice of mindfulness and compassion, and they begin to penetrate into each other, affect each other. And a little bit of the energy of my practice makes its way into the experience of suffering. And then when it comes down to rest again in the quieter parts of my mind, I store consciousness. It carries the print of my practice with it. And so the next time that I feel that suffering coming up, it doesn't come up as it was before. It comes up now with the print of my mindfulness on it, the print of my compassion on it. And each time I practice like that, it becomes a more balanced and integrated experience, right? So I have more capacity to be there inside. And it's like turning raw waste material in the compost pile into fertile soil. You layer it in, you turn it, and you let it do the work of them, do the work of becoming each other, right? You put the right ingredients in a compost pile, you can get it hot really fast. You can create conditions for transformation. And when we bring our practice to our suffering in the right way, it will change it very quickly. So please remember, as I shared last night, when you experience something enjoyable, to enjoy it. When you have that sense of, it feels really good to hold my suffering right now, celebrate that with yourself. Take a few extra breaths to be like, wow, I really want to honor that I have the capacity to build this capacity for embracing, for releasing, right? And you begin to feel your heart opening even more when you celebrate the beginnings of the transformation. You can do all of this without knowing anything about where your suffering comes from. All you have to do is be there with it, right? Oh. When I practice to be present and embrace the suffering in my heart and in my body, I have always felt myself open and I've always felt some release. I've never felt that not work. I have resisted going there. I have fought really hard to find a way out of opening myself to that embrace and taking up that practice. Like tried to rationalize my way out of many a situation of difficulty. But once you embark on that good work, that journey of going in and taking full ownership, acceptance, and an embrace of what's there, I don't know, for me it's always had an effect. And you see how working on the feeling dimension, we begin to release some of the tightness, the grasping, and the layers of stress and trauma that are there. Sound of the bell. So now to the second thing I want to share, which is the same thing. Actually, I just shared, but different angle. And you can try to forget everything I just said because I'm going to say the opposite now. That there's so many wonderful things you can do with your mind too. There's incredible power in our thoughts. And part of the practice is about calming the mind down. But another part of the practice is about learning to think beautifully, learning to think well. And I know that in Zen and in practice, thinking has a bad reputation. It's like get rid of your thinking as much as you possibly can. But the reality is that thinking is actually a core part of who we are as human beings, what we are as human beings. And the way that we think is so powerful. So yes, we want to calm it down deeply. We want to have moments where we don't need to think at all. But we also want to learn how to think beautifully. Learn how to think in such a way that the transformation is possible. That the healing can take place right there in that creative act of manifesting a thought. You know that in Buddhism, there are 3 layers of action that are talked about. Actually, there's a whole bunch of them, but there's most commonly 3. And when we invite the bell, we say those 3 right at the beginning. Body, speech, and mind. The 3 realms of action of body, speech, and mind in perfect oneness. So we want all of ourself to be there. We want all of our capacity to manifest in the world, to act, to be there when we do the bell invitation. There's action of the body. There's action of speech, which I would like to broaden to hold communication, really. Listening is just as much a part of that realm as speaking, right? Body, speech, and mind. Turn that inside out, if you will, so that mind is like way in the middle, like a sun radiating out from deep places, right? And those thoughts radiating out from deep in us can shape themselves into all sorts of things, like including how we listen to each other, how we speak to one another, and of course what we do with our bodies as we move through our days and weeks and months and years. Our thinking is right at the heart of us as part of the part of the world. It's part of what shapes the world. We have the idea that the thoughts inside of us are like quiet and unknown and not really a part of anything but my own little space somewhere quiet invisibly inside my own mind. And from the surface that looks to be somewhat true, but when you really settle in and see what a thought is and where it goes, you realize your thoughts are not yours alone, and your thoughts can never exist quietly, unsensed, unfelt, unheard by others. Well, it's a little shocking, right? Some of the things that we think we'd rather not have others know that we thought those thoughts. But they are there. They're in the world now. They have come out through us, manifested. Great power in our thinking. So when our thoughts are able to carry understanding, when they're able to carry compassion, when they're able to carry us with insight into the nature of things, wow, that's something we're bringing into the world. It's a wonderful contribution to make. So the Buddha encouraged us to think along the lines of Dharma, along the lines of the teachings and the practice and the insight that comes from the teaching and practice. We learn to look deeply into ourselves and into the world, and to discover the roots and the causes of our suffering, to discover ways to transform that, to find ways to bring loving kindness and compassion out into the world. Looking deeply. This is the thought-based work, right? The thinking-based work. We were talking about feelings before, now the thinking-based work. When you're able to understand something more deeply, you know what to do and what not to do in order to bring about well-being and to transform suffering. Right? Those are words that many of you may have heard Thich Nhat Hanh say. They're printed deep in my consciousness because I heard him say them so many times. When you make yourself fully present in the world and you look deeply into the nature of something, you understand it. And you understand when you see its nature, you understand how to take care of it, how to bring about well-being. And that is the path of practice, right? Understanding our suffering and walking the path of well-being. Oh. We understand the roots and the causes of our suffering in ourselves, in our family, in our society, in our ancestors, as part of humanity's ongoing evolution for hundreds and thousands of years. So, how do we do that, right? If you take the 13th breath and the 14th breath and you put them together, they make a beautiful pair. Breathing in, I look deeply with eyes of impermanence. Breathing out, I am able to release some of my grasping, attachment, desire, fear. Right? Breathing in, I see the impermanence here in whatever it is I'm looking at, right? And breathing out, I'm able to let go of ideas that tighten me around it, or previous concepts of this thing being permanent, something I cannot change, something I just have to accept like it is, right? The 13th breath opens our eyes to see the changes that are happening in every moment, in every way. And the 14th breath allows us to let go a little bit of how we are attached to it. So I don't have a... okay, I can try this. Oh, I got a better idea. Okay. You guys are... Oh, we'll get this one, right? We're in the middle of a snowstorm here. Okay, so let's just think about that cloud, right? Let's do this meditation on the cloud. I was gonna go get a flower, but snow is better. So when we look at the cloud as an object of meditation and we use the eyes of impermanence, right, we're going to just watch the cloud and watch how it changes. What conditions have come together and transformed themselves into the cloud as we see it? That's looking how things from the past have come into this moment. And also what conditions are coming together to transform that cloud moving forward, right? We see it evolving right in before our eyes. And when I look out the window on the other side of this room, I see clouds transforming, right? Clouds transforming because of the conditions coming together in the atmosphere in such a way that little crystalline, beautiful crystalline shapes are formed, and the cloud that was up in the sky is now landing all about on the walkway and on the roofs and on the grass. And we say winter has come, right? But really, what? A cloud has come, right? There's impermanence there. The cloud is transformed into snow, and actually, because it's not quite cold enough, that snow hitting the ground is transforming into water. And it's forming puddles and pools. And when I hear the cars going by, I hear the whoosh of the water being sprayed from the tires. I look with eyes of impermanence. Breathing in, I see the impermanence of the cloud, the impermanent nature of the cloud. And breathing out, I release desire. So that desire, the cloud is kind of easy because we are actually really happy to see it transform and such. But the desire I have is a code word. Desire here means anything that involves like wanting, grasping, needing, fearing, aversion, all this energy of towards or away from. The same energy we have in fight or flight, right? All that energy. We can let it go a little bit, right? So when I look into the cloud, I might have thought, oh, that cloud is so beautiful and majestic in the sky, and I like it there. But it suddenly transformed into a snow, and it came down to earth, and I don't have my cloud anymore, right? But I can, seeing the impermanence of it, I actually see the continuation of the cloud in snow. And my wanting it to be like cloud can soften because now I can say, wow, I can still enjoy the snow, the cloud as snow. So I soften my energy of desire, grasping, attachment, any fear that would have come from such expectations or Those two breaths go beautifully together. Now, take it away from the cloud and let's go into the suffering in our hearts. Right? Breathing in, I'm aware of the suffering in my heart. Breathing out, I hold the suffering in my heart. And now I look deeply into the suffering and I contemplate the impermanence of it. Where has it come from? Where is it going? How is it shifting, changing? What has come together to make it the way it is? What is falling apart from it to show its new life and new forms? You know, we've already done this practice, but without the thoughts. In the embrace of the feeling, it already changed the experience of the suffering in our heart. There's impermanence there. Looking deeply, I see the causes and the conditions that have come together to shape my suffering. Looking deeply, I can see how with practice, they continue to change, to shift, to unfold, to evolve. And I don't grab on so tightly to what I thought was me, was mine, was defining who I am. Now, with a breath in, impermanence, and a breath out, fading of desire, fading of attachment, fading of expectation, of obligation, I can make some space. Here's a real example that comes up often for me. I find sometimes when my children, when I'm interacting with my children, I find sometimes that they say things and do things that make me very upset. And there's a particular one of these reactions in me that I would characterize like this. That is not okay. Right? That is absolutely not okay. And it's a very hard, tight clenching in my heart that says, my child cannot do that, cannot say that, right? And it's very painful. And you know what happens if you say something like that to your child with that kind of energy. You know, it marks them, right? It can traumatize them. The person they trust, the person they love, suddenly furious with them for just acting out of whatever was going on for them. And suddenly you're like, you're not going there. So that painful contraction in my heart, so strong, and I'm looking outward, I want to send it out, the energy outside. But the practice asks me not to do that. It says, don't just run with your suffering, right? Acknowledge it's there, hold it, embrace it, bring it in, bring it home. Breathe with it to calm it down, and look deeply into it. And you know, when I start holding that tight place in my heart, in my solar plexus that wants to come out and say, no, my dear child, you cannot act like that. That is not okay. You see, I'm already sounding better. It's still strong, but a little bit better. When I take a hold of it and I look deeply, I have no idea where this comes from. Right? There's nothing in my day that appears to have made such a problem, and yet I have a big problem. It's coming from deep, deep, deep inside, deep habit energy, right? A transmission of my society and my ancestors. And when I can breathe in and look with eyes of impermanence to see how the life and the suffering of my ancestors has transformed itself into this experience, and breathe out and offer the possibility that I can hold this with love and release some of that tension, that desire. That is using eyes of impermanence and using the fading of grasping, desire, energy, those breathings, to calm down that old seed of suffering so that I don't have to pass it on to the next generation. And instead, I can offer an alternative. Yeah, it's gonna show me what I can do to offer well-being and what I probably shouldn't do if I wanted to, right? Or I will continue the cycle of suffering. That's the kind of understanding that will come from looking deeply with eyes of impermanence. But I get that embrace when I know that my ancestors suffered and I'm holding their suffering with mine. It's not actually harder. I know that in your mind you might think, gosh, that's so much suffering to try to hold. It's no more than you've already got. You already have it all. You're not going to get more, right? It's already there. You're going instead with your practice to honor, respect, and welcome and give your ancestors the opportunity to experience something beautiful, some healing, some insight, and some space. This doesn't belong to me. It doesn't belong to you. It's a transmission of life It is like a thread in the tapestry of life that I've been handed, and I can weave it out of habit energy, or now I can weave it out of my practice going forward. And I will do my best to weave beautifully in this cloth. Where are the roots of my suffering? They are vast, they are deep. I open my heart to hold them all. I open my heart to welcome the life and the story of my mother and my father, my grandmothers, my grandfathers, and so many generations who always tried so hard to live well, but may have come up short here and there. And I carry the wounds and the shortcomings of my ancestors. Yet I also carry their aspiration and their understanding and their love, and in this moment I bring it all together. Aware of this vast impermanent tapestry of life that I am a part of, I will now find a new path. Now, if you know a couple of very specific things about the source of your suffering, particular moments, right, particular people, right, that's wonderful, but you don't need to, right? You can use your practice still to open your heart in this way and create this spacious understanding even without knowing the details, right? The detail is we are the continuation and transformation of our ancestors. That's the base, right? Now, if you can name a whole bunch of things, wonderful. I can do some, right? I know specific places and people where certain qualities in me come from. I think I know, right? But ultimately, what I know is that I have received it all, right? And so by opening my heart for that, I received all the suffering, but I've also received all the tools, all the wisdom, all the strength and the compassion too. And it's not just my blood ancestors. It's my land ancestors, my spiritual ancestors too. They are all here. My wife Fern talks about this kind of practice as being like aware that there's a basket, a great big basket of seeds, right? And it's full of all these different possibilities of how life could manifest, this basket of seeds. And each one of us has like a handful of these seeds that we're carrying. But they all come from the basket of life, right? Where all these seeds are. And we need to understand that so that we don't grab too tightly onto the story that we think we are, and instead leave the possibility for what we can become, right? And I talk about it, as I have already in this talk shared with you, as like a tapestry of life in which there are so many threads, and I have somehow ended up with these, this one and that one and this one, and one of them's really nice and the other one I really don't like at all, but nonetheless it's here. It's the thread that I've been handed, and I do have the opportunity to weave with my conscious breath, with my beautiful thoughts, with my open heart, to weave these threads in this cloth of life. Right? These images are there to help us remember and understand the great possibility and potential that we have, and how thinking beautifully, thinking in accord with the Dharma, that is to look with eyes of impermanence and to see that change and transformation, can open that door. I'm going to stop now and make space for some questions. I went a little longer than I wanted to, so I'm embracing that right there. It's kind of tricky to do this particular Q&A kind of thing with a big group online. So I will ask that if you have a question that you would like to ask, that you would chat it into the everyone stream. Like, make sure you're addressing it to everyone, but write into the chat a question. And the best question is going to be a question that's really about how you are experiencing these practices in your life today, this week, this moment of your life, this larger moment of your life. What's really going on there? Better than those kind of questions are better than speculative or metaphysical kind of questions, because they will have to do with things that all of us are experiencing. If you're experiencing it in your daily life, many of us will be too, right? And that's why it's a good question. So please feel free to enter something into the chat, and while you do that, I know that I'm not going to be able to answer 30 plus questions, so we'll try to get in there. I do want to share that there was one that came earlier, and it was a sort of a practical question, and it'd be pretty quick to answer. It was, when you look at all these 16 breathings, I think I'm getting this question right. When you look at the 16 breathings, and you're practicing with one or two or another one of them or another one of them, how do you know when it's the right moment to move on to another one? Right? And I think it's completely up to you, right? Breathing in and out might be enough, just that. Noticing whether it's long or short or deep or shallow might be enough. Might be enough for 20 years of practice. But it might only be enough for 5 minutes of practice too, in which case you might want to open yourself to being aware of your body and calming your body. It's completely up to you. This is a design as you go program. The Dharma is available here and now. The Dharma is not a matter of time, and we just discussed that with impermanence, right? It's not a matter of time, and it's also for each of us to discover for ourselves. Yeah. So there's no right answer for when you should move from this one to that one. You can be creative with creating making a program of these practices as you like. I like to pair them, as if you haven't noticed. The question of recording the Q&A, yeah. If anybody has an objection, they can just let it go in, but I don't think that the chat gets recorded unless you copy and paste it somewhere. Well, sometimes when suffering, sorrow, comes up during a sit, I start to try to embrace it. But when I try to experience it as feeling, a sensation, and maybe ask whether it is painful or not, the sorrow isn't there anymore. Just tender feelings. And I'm left wondering if I'm not then actually embracing my sorrow. I hope this makes sense. I have the same experience. And for me, it's a wonderful experience, because it shows that the power of the practice, right? We are caught in a particular idea about sorrow or sadness or some other suffering, and the moment we start to practice with it, its power shifts, changes. It is not over us anymore. It's not pulling us, pushing us anymore. It's now we are right in the middle of it, and our practice immediately changes the experience of it. Celebrate that moment, that awareness. That is a little bit of healing right there, right? when it's not so strong is actually a good time to look deeply into it, to then form and shape those beautiful thoughts. Ask those questions. Where have you come from? What are you made of? What conditions have come together to bring about what was hard for me a few moments ago? What was there? Right? Because when it's overwhelming, it's very hard to look deeply. But once you've done that embrace and it's calmed down, yeah, I love the expression of that. There's just a tender sensation left. Yeah, yeah. Hmm. Is it recommended to skip to the breathings that seem most relevant in a particular moment? Or is it necessary to go from the first to the 16th in order, in order for the later ones to be effective? Hmm. They're all inside each other. So ultimately, if you're going to be looking deeply into something with eyes of impermanence or eyes of no beginning and no end, no birth, no death, right? Um, you're going to be doing your basic breathing anyway. Breathing in is my base, on which I then serve the possibility of looking deeply, right? Breathing in, I am here, fully present in this moment, and aware that I'm looking into um, an emotion or a flower or the cloud or another person or a situation in society. I'm going to investigate that, but my breath is the base. So you find them all inside each other. You'll find your heart and your sense of feeling inside all you're looking deeply. You'll find thoughts of agitation, and you'll find your beautiful thoughts of interbeing and impermanence too. They're all there. So no, it's not necessary. However, I found it really good in my learning process with this to take particular ones and really stick with them for a long time to make sure I understood what they were. So I like, for example, I practiced with just being aware of my body and then feeling in my body for months, just those first few, and just to really get the sense of what was my body and where's the feeling, and then also be aware, okay, so my mind is also running, okay, that's mind, this is feeling, this is body. And it took time. It took many months for me to develop a sense of competence, I guess, in being with the different parts of me. I know people that suffer from chronic pain and find that mindfulness of body sensations makes them overwhelmed with pain. Yeah. What would you suggest for practice? So the practicing with pain in the body is very interesting because there certainly is a part of our physical experience which can and usually is to some extent painful. Like there's pain there. But a lot of pain that we experience um, is actually the result of how we're reacting to the sensations in our body. The Buddha talked about that with the arrow, the second arrow. You get shot in the arm by an arrow and it hurts, right? But if you get shot in the arm a second time in the same spot, it hurts not twice as much, but 100 times as much as the first one. And he said that second arrow is how we react to the pain that we have. So I think it's really important to work with pain on multiple levels. And calming down mental agitation and stress in our daily lives is a huge part of working with pain, and especially chronic pain for me. So I know I'm not answering the question directly in terms of mindfulness of body sensations brings about more pain, right? What to do. But to work with chronic pain, I think we need to work on many different levels, because it all gets mixed up. And if you don't have a sense of clarity in how you're contributing to your health by the way you think about yourself, the way you think about the world or other people in your lives, because all of that affects your health. If you don't have that kind of practice alive for you, you won't know. It'll just be a blur of pain, and you won't know where it's coming from. So it might actually be helpful not to practice mindfulness of the body, but to be doing mindfulness exercises, developing a capacity to see our mind and our emotional life, and where are we building the structures of pain and suffering in our thinking and our emotions. And those are then impacting that full sense of health that we have. The body may still hurt, right? But how we respond to that hurt is huge part of what we experience. I'm not really a chronic pain expert, so I don't want to dive too far there. I feel guilt looking back on the times I yelled at my own children for doing something I felt they shouldn't have been doing. You're getting personal here. I know it has marked them, and I wish I could take those moments back. I expect holding that feeling of guilt as suffering is a good first step to address the guilt, but that practice doesn't unmark my kids. Just wondering about what to do with the guilt and how to move forward in a healing way for the children as well. I'm glad you asked this question. I think we are all, to some extent, on somewhere in the spectrum of this relationship that's been described. Whether we are the parent or the child, or maybe both. So the remorse that we can feel when we realize we have hurt someone in our behavior, in Buddhist psychology is actually seen as potentially a positive thing. It's listed as neutral on that spectrum of whether you're going down the wholesome path or the unwholesome path, right? It's listed as neutral. To be able to see that we have made a mistake is so important. To be able to understand that we're not perfect, and for that to be okay is so important. These are all practices that we need to work on, right? Many of us suffer a lot because we can't live up to our own expectations, right? And that's a big practice to do right there. Just working with yourself, but also looking deeply to see that transmission is not something that experience is not something you have to own, but it's a transmission that you received, and you got to give it back. Doesn't mean you have to blame other people, but you got to not try to your own. Allow yourself to be part of the bigger story of human evolution, generation to generation, slowly learning how to do things more beautifully and in a wholesome way. So that remorse will turn to guilt, right? If we spend too much time telling ourselves that story, right? You tell yourself the story, you rehearse it, it will grow stronger. So that's not the story you want to be telling yourself. You simply want to acknowledge that, yes, you have made a mistake. And you want to hold that space inside. Calm the mind down, make space for the feeling. It's painful, it hurts. You might need to grieve a little or a lot. But through that process, you develop that relationship that Emer asked in the first question I did, where you start the embrace and suddenly the power of it's gone. The power of the suffering is lessened. The urgency's down. You want to be with it so that that urgency dissipates a little, and then allow yourself to look deeply into the roots of why you feel this way, why you have these high expectations of yourself, where they come from, and allow those things to go back to their source, back to their root. Give yourself the opportunity to fully accept and to make a new path, right? So the only other part of this I want to share about is, that's the working with yourself, the guilt, the remorse you feel about the way you've acted. Sometimes humiliating too, right? You need to work with all those things and slowly unlock those knots of tension and obligation that are inside you. Turn them into possibility. Possibility for what? Possibility for beginning anew. And it's never too late to begin anew. And I say never, I mean never. Like you can begin anew with your parents after they've passed away. Like that never. You can write letters to them expressing all the work you're doing to transform and continue and give them their continuation a beautiful future through your life or through their grandchildren and so on, right? It's never too late to begin anew. And you can certainly begin anew with your children at any time. And they may not forgive you, but that's not the point. You're not trying to salage your wounded pride, right? The point is to contribute beautifully, right, to this tapestry of life. And you're beginning a new, authentic and genuine beginning anew with them. That is to share with them what is so wonderful about their life and how much they mean to you and how beautiful they are in the world, right? Tell them those things. Children need to hear that from their parents. And if their parents can't tell them, they need to hear it from friends. They need to hear it from others, right? Even old children. Beginning anew has flower watering in it, where you water the wholesome seeds, the wholesome understanding, the beauty and the potential in someone, where you really help that to grow. You appreciate them and you express your gratitude to them. Beginning anew also has in it an ownership of your part in the suffering that you caused them suffering, and there's an apology there and an ownership there, and that's also a wonderful way to begin anew. Beginning anew also involves working with someone on how you communicate and interact so that when they say things and do things that cause you suffering, you're able to that you don't have to react back to them, but you're able to let them know that it hurts and that you suffer and that you want to work with them on changing those patterns of communication. Beginning anew has many dimensions, but it's never too late to start doing that. A continuation of this question, how do I help my daughter when I see that she is perhaps marking her children, transmitting the suffering on? I think we help, especially our family members or our good friends, those closest to us who we care about and we see them causing suffering. I think we help them most when we are doing the practice ourselves. And again, it's not about getting a particular result. Like, like you might be wanting to heal with your children or your grandchildren in order to get some, some sense from them that like, okay, I'm okay actually. I know I made mistakes, but please tell me I'm okay, right? Like that's not really about helping them, that's about helping ourselves. And so we want to come from a place of real authenticity, genuine solidity in our practice when we're wanting to help others with their practice. And so the best way is to do the practice ourselves, right? To actually manifest those techniques and the fruits of that. So I've always thought of my children as I've always tried to think of my best moments. I've tried to think of my children as not my children, but as children of humanity, children of the earth. And so my role as a parent is to water the wholesome seeds in that garden. I don't know what's going to grow, right? I know that like I have made mistakes, and so I've watered the unwholesome seeds. I know that there's other people watering the garden too, and they may be watering the unwholesome seeds, right? So what I can do is water the wholesome seeds and continue to do that. And again, I may not see the result the ideal result I'm looking for in my gardening in that way, but I'm going to do my best to try to water those conditions. Maybe it's not this generation that manifests the forgiveness and the healing. Maybe it's 1 or 2 generations further down. But I've got to build up the basic conditions in that soil for healing and transformation. Start where we are, right? If there's really a need to interact in terms of practical things, I've witnessed a lot of suffering in family relationships when people try to talk about, when practitioners try to talk about their views about mindful consumption with their family members. And at the same time, I think it's one of the most important things to talk about. But we talk about it not as you should do this, because if you don't, X, Y, and Z will happen. But we talk about it in terms of how we are exemplifying it in our own lives and inviting them to experience the joy that we experience through the practice, right? So many of the ways that we behave in the world are due to overwhelm and stress from unmindful consuming. We unmindfully consume in society with media and such. We unmindfully consume with food and drink. We unmindfully consume in relationships where we just continue old habit energies of communication, and we unmindfully consume in our own way of thinking about ourselves and thinking about each other. All of those things are important to be talking about if we want to bring health and well-being to our, not just our family, but our society. But again, how to do that without making someone defensive because it seems like you're pointing out a failure that they have or something. Right? That's the key. Thus, share your own practice and your joy. So we're going to have to end, right? Yeah, really soon. What's our scheduled time? Good. Pretty soon. So I'm just letting you know that. I'm going to try to keep going. I am preparing and equipping myself to practice art therapy as a profession. I'd like to do that. And one of my aspirations is to bring mindfulness into the practice of the art. I'm both curious as to if you had any experience with it personally in your journey so far, and if there are any resources you could recommend connected to the path of the Plum Village teachings. Oh my. If anybody else has any thoughts about that in terms of the Plum Village tradition, you're welcome to chat in about resources. I think that almost any dimension of mindfulness practice would be wonderful to bring into art and art therapy. I haven't met or I haven't been involved in that intersection formally. What I do know, though, is that there is a lot going on in our subconscious, our store consciousness, that finds its way out if we are able to practice art, finds itself into expression. The art that I do the most in my life is through music. And sometimes that involves working with words, poetry and verse and chant. And sometimes it's all in the realm of music and note and tone and various instruments and my voice. But there's something really special about being able to use, say, mindfulness of breathing and mindfulness of the body and of feelings in terms of calming, right? Really coming home to some calmer, clearer space, and then opening the artistic door, opening the creative door. Because I find the things that want to come out are things I never would have been able to do if I was in any kind of a mental state. Like if I'm really grounded in my body and my feelings, the stuff that comes out is really powerful and potent and sometimes very insightful. And I have no idea where it comes from. Like, I don't know how I came up with that. But the store consciousness, the part of us which is not visible to our waking eyes and ears and nose, right? The store of all of our memories and our ancestors' memories, the store of all our habit energies, ours and our ancestors, the store of all the conditions which might manifest on our beautiful planet Earth, right? That store is there. It's a part of who we are. And it's always working, right? It's alive down there. And so when we calm and we can open that up, so many beautiful things can come. So many insightful things can come to the surface. So I think the practice of mindfulness, especially in terms of calming the mental state, right? And getting in touch with body and feelings will be huge in supporting art therapy. Somebody's really pulling some poetry in here. Got the whole one in there. On the Khalil Gibran quote. Oh, you don't see it? Maybe is it personal? Is it? Oh, it's privately. Okay, I got it here. I'll read it to you. You may know it. Okay, you may not. Your children are not your children. They are the sons and the daughters of life long before itself. They come through you, but they are not from you. And though they are with you, they belong not to you. It's hard to click this along. You can give them your love, but not your thoughts. They have their own thoughts. They have their own thoughts. You can house their bodies, but not their souls. For their souls dwell in the place of tomorrow, which you cannot visit, not even in your dreams. You can try to be like them, but you cannot make them just like you. Strive to be like them, but you cannot make them just like you. Life is longing for itself. Life's longing for itself. So Dustin asked if the Nourishing Happiness chant, which I did at the beginning of our morning session, is available anywhere. If it got recorded today, it might be available somewhere. Does that answer that question? Dear friends, it's time for us to wrap up this session. So, as a way of sort of thinking back through the idea of, or going back through the idea of beautiful thoughts, healing thoughts, and developing our capacity to think beautifully, I think by practicing mindfulness, I found most of my suffering actually comes from the way that I treat myself mentally. There is a lot of self-criticism and judgment, failure of expectations of myself, etc., that has been a part of my life all my life. I think many of us, maybe most of us, have that to some extent. There's this grasping, this tight energy around who we are, who we think we are, and what we are. It locks us up into a particular identity. But using eyes of impermanence, looking deeply into the nature of things, calming down the agitated mind, and doing that opens a doorway for us to experience something more than that contraction. You know, society and our family appear to be the ones who expect things of us. But the battlefield is really in our own minds and hearts. And actually, that's really quite wonderful. I'm sorry, that sounds a little strange, you know. Yeah, we're really hard on ourselves and we cause ourselves a lot of suffering, but that's actually a really good thing because, thankfully, this is the place, our own mind and heart is the place where we can exercise the capacity and power to reshape things. We can't really exercise a capacity on others around us or on society, but we can bring, right, what is within us out. We can reshape what is real for us in our experience. It would be so nice if we could get to a place in our minds where true reality of life is our reality. Wouldn't that be nice? Like if what's actually happening in terms of reality is what we thought was happening. I think that would be really nice. But most of the time we're lost in worrying about things. We've taken ourselves outside of what is truly real into the layers and layers and layers of our own sufferings and the sufferings of society and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And we're off in a world of speculating about what's real, and our mind is running. But when we calm the mind down and when we give it these tools of understanding, looking deeply, we can open that door to actually touch reality and its true nature. We're going to do more of this tomorrow morning. Looking deeply with eyes of interbeing and permanence, looking deeply with eyes of no beginning and no end. We'll continue to do that. But you already have the tools. They're very simple. Breathing in, I look with those eyes. Breathing out, I practice letting go, right? It's that simple. I look to see the changes and I let go of my expectations, my grasping. I look to see the continuation, the transformation, and I let go, right? And that opens us closer and closer, step by step, to what is actually real, what's actually there, and not the layers of our suffering thrown on top of what's there. Oh. So we can use feeling meditations, heart-centered meditations, to stop playing the role of being a victim, to create this relationship with things that's true and upright. And we can use our insight, our understanding, and our clear thinking, our beautiful thinking, right, to penetrate deeply into the true nature of things and really let go. I'm going to step out, and I think that our organizers might want to review what's happening in the next hours and day, so that we um, are all on the same track of our retreat. And that kind of expectation, shared expectation, is clear. I'll invite a sound of the bell, and then Janet or someone, yeah, you can take over. Thank you.